In 1979, Margaret Thatcher would win premiership in the general election. The consequences of this would be dire on the working class throughout Britain and would result in both short-term and long-term destitution and the erosion of socialism within the British left, along with the destruction of union power, as I will explain in this video. The MUN sought to fight back against the shifting political status quo with Thatcherism, having pushed for a free market system. Political academic Michael Parenti best describes this.
The free market mythology, it argues that the most ruthless, selfish, opportunistic, greedy, calculating plunderers, applying the most heartless measures in cold-blooded pursuit of corporate interests and wealth accumulation, will produce the best results for all of us through something called the invisible hand.
This ultimately led to the MUN taking on the neoliberal government as a result of threats of redundancy due to pit closures. As I will further explain in this video, I regard this as a turning point moment in 20th century British history. The MUN and the trade union movement had seen solid progress throughout the 60s and 70s. However, it was the 1972 miners' strike which saw a great victory for the miners. Over 280,000 miners and 289 pits went on strike for better pay and more time to hit backlog coal targets. This was a great success for Joe Gormley, MUN leader and Scargill's predecessor, as the Heath government ended up accepting the MUN strike terms, which saw workers gain a 7.9% pay rise. Along with this, the Heath government had to abandon its 1971 Industrial Act, which sought to limit strike action. For the MUN and the TUC, this was a major victory. But it also gave unions and union leaders hope for change even against hardline capitalist governments. By 1979, the Tory government had showed signs of agitating towards the privatisation of state-run industries and the cutting of certain industries deemed economically unviable. This was evident under the 1978 Ridgely Plan, which outlined how the government would defeat unions in order to conduct privatisation of industry. Within the plan, state industries would have to hit specific targets of production in order to stockpile coal, steel, etc. By 1980, the Thatcher government had started union bashing under government acts, such as the 1980 Employment Act, which restricted picketing, along with the 1982 Employment Act, which sought to financially oppress striking workers through restrictions on supplementary pay. The introduction of Ian McGregor to the head of the National Coal Board certainly raised more concerns, after McGregor oversaw the redundancy of 55,000 British steel workers the year prior. The MUN knew that the National Coal Board had been instructed to enact the Ridley Plan in Yorkshire, with George Hayes, the South Yorkshire head of the National Coal Board, telling MUN officials that the pits had been making a loss, producing 250,000 tonnes of coal annually, and that the pits were to be closed. Hayes then requested the miners produce 500,000 tonnes of coal the next year. MUN branch delegate Mick Carter argued that we had no options. If we accept the closure, then the rest of Yorkshire would go as well. The MUN and Scargill knew the reality of their situation and were aware that this loss of 20,000 jobs and 20 pit closures wouldn't stop there and would just be the beginning. The miners' strike would start in March 1984 due to the sense of urgency of the nature of the situation miners found themselves in. The strike itself would see over 187,000 miners from collieries all over England, Scotland and Wales form picket lines. Miners would travel up and down the country to go picketing, ensuring that other miners would stand in solidarity with the MUN. As a result of this, Nottingham became a key battleground for both miners and the government. The Nottingham miners were more hesitant to strike due to miners in Nottingham receiving greater pay along with better overtime rates. This caused a significant internal rift within miners' national solidarity. However, it would be picketing at Orgreave which would gain the most notoriety during the strike. In June 1984, over 10,000 miners would go to picket the movement of coke to a nearby steelworks. However, the miners would find themselves trapped in fields by the police, who proceeded to restrict the picketing and go on to attack the miners, resulting in 187 injuries and over 700 arrests.
Will you not negotiate with them ever?
I will never negotiate with people who use coercion and violence to achieve their objective. They are the enemies of democracy. They are not interested in the future of democracy. They are trying to kill democracy for their own purposes.
To your right, to your right.
This suppression of unions had resulted in over 700 arrests, with many of these arrests being unjustifiable or failing to provide a substantial charge under the Employment Act of 1981. The result of this industrial oppression was many unions disbanding and subsequently many of the ideas of working people being forgotten, with the employers successfully busting many unions and removing their power. Thatcher had essentially crushed the collective power of working people of Britain by the end of her time in government. This spilled over into left-wing political parties, with the emergence of Tony Blair winning his role as leader at the Labour conference of July 1994. This signified massive change in the ideological standpoint of the Labour Party and the left wing within Britain, with Blair removing Clause 4 from the Labour Party constitution, something that signified the Labour Party's support for socialism and Marxism. The result of the miners' strike was ultimately victory for the Thatcherite government, with over 200,000 miners losing their jobs between 1980 and 1994. With the shattering of the trade union movement, the working class of Britain was in a state the likes of which it had not seen for 50 years. Thatcher's narrative of there being no such thing as society gave business owners an excuse not to worry about the workers they were making redundant, nor the social implications of this. Thus, in my view, the defeat of the miners' strike was a pivotal moment in British history. It did not just pave the way for the collapse of the UK's manufacturing base, but it also resulted in a fundamental shift to the right in British politics. That is a shift which continues to be reflected in the political philosophies of the major political parties to this day.